Okay, I'm going to start you off with just a little mini tiny sample of the ribbed hem and then transitioning into the single crochet and forked cluster rows so you can see how that comes together, and if you've never done a forked cluster you will be able to see how that is done. So just going to start off real quick with the ribbed hem here. I am using my smaller sized hook, so I'm using a 5mm and a 5.5mm in the pattern. Be sure you do your gauge swatch before you start in on the full pattern, because you may need a different size hook in order to meet gauge. So just that's the most important part. For me, my smaller hook is size 5mm, so that's what I'm doing here. All right, so we're going to start by chaining 9. Okay, and then we're going to flip this over and we're going to be working through the back bumps of this chain. So we're going to skip that very first bump and we're going to do a single crochet into this second chain from the hook and in each chain thereafter. So we're going to have a chain, we're going to have 8 single crochets worked into this chain. And 8. All right, so we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn. So there's our first little tiny rib. To get that ribbed texture, we're going to be working through the back loops only. However, I do a little trick. In the first stitch and the very last stitch of every row, I work through both loops. I think that creates a cleaner edge. You certainly don't have to if that's not how you want to. It's going to work out just fine either way. But so through this first one, I work through both loops. So single crochet. And then in all of the other ones, all the way up to the very last one, we're going to be working through the back loop only. All right, so here is both loops. We're going to be working through just this back loop. All right, so I'm going to single crochet my way back down to the very last stitch of this row. Back loops only. And then when I get to my very last one, I'm going to work through both loops only. Okay, so you're going to have 8 single crochets, chain 1 and turn. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. So both loops only of this first stitch, and then the back loop only of the next 6. And then in this last stitch, in the 8th stitch, we're going to do both loops. Okay, so I'm going to get going on this. I'm going to put together several rows here. Go ahead and refer to the written pattern for the number of ribs you will need for the size that you're making. Again, I'm not making a full one right here for the purposes of illustrating this to you, but I'm going to get several going. We want it to be an even number so that our forked clusters will work out. And I will get going on this and I will meet you shortly, and we will do the first several rows of the tube together. Okay, I think I've got enough rows here to demonstrate this this stitch to you, this forked cluster stitch. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to end my ribbing by chaining 1, and I'm going to bring the first row and the last row together, and we are going to seam this into a tube, because we're actually going to be crocheting the main part of the body as a tube. So we're going to just slip stitch this tube closed. All right, so of course this seam that I'm making here is going to be on the inside of the sweater. And the very first row that we're going to do is a single crochet row, and that is also going to be the wrong side. Okay, so we just seamed that together with slip stitches. Let's chain 1, and we're going to keep this on the wrong side. So the first row is, like I said, is a single crochet row. Your single crochet rows are always and forever going to be the wrong side of your sweater. So this is a 2-row repeat on this the texture of this sweater. You're going to have a row of single crochet, which again will be the wrong side, and then as you turn and work the other direction, you're going to be doing rows of forked clusters, and those will be on the right side of the sweater. All right, so what we're going to do here for our very first row is we are going to simply do a row of single crochet all the way around. All right, so I'm going to do that by just simply placing, oh boy, I almost did the cardinal sin of not switching my hook. All right, so we're switching to our larger hook size to do the tube of the sweater. So I'm using a 5.5 for that. Okay, so at the end of each of your ribs that you just made, you're simply going to place a single crochet. So one single crochet at the end of each of those ribs. So based on your size, the number of ribs that you have in your hem is going to be the number of single crochets in this first round. All right, so I'm going to just do this all the way around. Okay, I have made it back to the first stitch. I am going to join my rounds with every round with a slip stitch. Okay, so my next round is going to be a round of forked clusters, which are basically a special twist on the double crochet stitch. So to bring our row up to height, we're going to be chaining 2 loosely. This does not count as a stitch for the purposes of this pattern. So we're going to chain 2, and then we are going to turn. I'm going to go ahead and just flip this way to be easier to work. Okay, so this would be the right side of our pattern at this point. All right, so here's how you're going to do your forked clusters. It's kind of a twist on the double crochet stitch. We're always going to begin our forked cluster in the same stitch that we slip stitched in and chained off of. Okay, that does count as part of our stitch count. And a forked cluster is made over 2 stitches. Here's how the first one will go. So you're going to yarn over and insert your hook into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up. Okay, and then you're going to do that same thing into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up. Okay, so you have 5 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 3 loops. Yarn over and pull through the final 3 loops. That is how you make your first forked cluster. Now for the second one and moving onward, what you'll do is you basically have two legs here, and you'll start to see it a little bit better as the texture builds on itself. But you've got 1 leg and 2 legs. The first leg of your next forked cluster will always be started in this same stitch that you ended your last forked cluster in. And then the next leg will be made in the next stitch. Okay, here's how that looks. So yarning over and putting in your hook through that same stitch that you ended your last one. Yarn over and pull up. Okay, and straight away yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up. Yarn over, pull through 3, yarn over, pull through 3 for your next forked cluster, okay? Once again, we're going to begin in this stitch and end in this stitch. So yarning over, putting your hook into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up, yarn over into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 3, yarn over, pull through 3. Okay, speeding up a little bit. We'll do a couple more together here. Okay, you can see that texture coming along. Okay, I'm going to get to it, and I am going to meet you at the end of this little teeny tiny round and show you how to close the round, where you're going to be putting the last forked cluster stitch of each round and how to begin your next round as well. So I will see you there. All right, I'm reaching the end of my round. Okay, I'm continuing with my forked clusters, and I just wanted to show you what this is going to look like at the end of the round so there's no confusion. All right, so right here, technically, you have 1 more stitch of your round, right? You got this one right here. However, you're going to be placing the last leg of your last forked cluster into that same stitch that you started, into that slip stitch. And that's what's going to keep your stitch count correct. Okay, so you're going to be tempted to end it here, okay? But you're actually going to do your last stitch into the same place that you chained off of, okay? And then you are going to join the round by slip stitching to that first stitch and chaining 1, okay? So there is the beautiful little forked cluster texture. And now what you're going to do is you're going to turn. So again, we're on our wrong side now. And this is going to be a row of single crochet. Just straight up single crochet all the way around. And this is your 2-row repeat. You're going to be on the wrong side when you're doing single crochets. You're going to be on the right side when you're doing your forked clusters. Okay, so I am going to just quickly get my way around here and I'll meet you at the end, and we'll do, just going to start off one more row of the forked clusters for you just to be sure that you've got a handle on it. All right, so I will see you there. Okay, I've made it to the end of the round. I'm going to slip stitch and chain 2 because my next round is a round of forked clusters. Okay, so let's just get going here. So again, beginning in that very same stitch where your chain is coming off of, we're going to start the first leg of our forked cluster and then straight into the next one. Okay, you can mark that if you want. You kind of get used to what it looks like. And off you go again. Okay, I think that you can get going on the tube. This is going to be the 2-row repeat for the entire tube. Again, when you come back around to the end of the round, you'll be doing your forked cluster over this stitch and this stitch. Okay, and if you need to, just do your counts, do your stitch counts, but I think you'll get used to it as you go along. Okay, so I have completed the main part of the torso of the sweater, all the way from the hem up to where the sleeves are going to get split. This is right where the armpit is. This is going to become the arm opening. And now what we're going to do is we're going to be making 2 of these upper flaps. Let me see if I can get the whole thing in the frame. So this is the first one that I have completed. I'm going to be doing this exact same thing on this side, and then we will seam them together across the shoulders before we put on the hood and do the sleeves. So I just wanted to show you how to do that part. I did one of them so you could kind of visualize it. So this is the one that I did first, which I just continued on with my working yarn that I was already using. And when you come back to do the other side, which is going to be an identical flap, kind of upper panel, this is where you are going to rejoin. So I am going to make a slip knot onto my hook. And right here for right-handed crocheters, if you're left-handed, it's just going to be on the opposite side. But for right-handed, we are going to rejoin with the wrong side facing. Okay, so right now I have the wrong side facing me. So I am going to be rejoining over here in this next available stitch. So I made a slip knot onto my hook. And again, I have the wrong side facing me because I'm going to be starting with a row of single crochet. So I am simply going to, so if you're left-handed, you're going to be rejoining on this side and working in this direction. But if you're right-handed like me, this is where you're going to join. So right here, we've got this stitch being used up. So my next stitch is this one right here. Yep, I'm right there. Okay, so I am going to slip stitch to join, I'm going to slip stitch to join my yarn. And then I am going to chain 1. And then my very first single crochet is going to be into that same stitch as well, because that is a stitch along the row here for our stitch count. So that's going to be where I make my very first single crochet of this row. All right, so what we're going to be doing is this first row is going to be simply a row of single crochet all the way across. And then we're going to continue with our 2-row repeat for the majority of this other flap on this side. So again, all the way across, and I'm going to basically get going on that. So I'm going to get going on this section here, all the way from the armpit up to this last row of forked clusters. And then I will come back and with you, I will do these last several rows of just this little extension, which creates this neckline for us. And this is all done in one piece. I'm trying to reduce the number of ends that we have to weave in. So we're actually going to do one side, and then we're going to single crochet our way across, and we're going to do the other side. And I will show you how to do that when we get there. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I have finished my row of single crochet for the first row of this top panel, and I am going to chain loosely 2 chains. That is not going to count as a stitch. And then we are going to turn, and we're going to do a row of forked clusters here. So the way that we're going to begin is, since that doesn't count as a stitch, the first leg of our forked cluster is going to go into that same stitch, that very first one. And the second leg of our forked cluster is going to go into this second one, just like this. So this is our first forked cluster. Okay, so the second one, actually let me stitch mark that. Okay, so you've got your little turning chain there, which doesn't count, and then that was our first forked cluster. So the second one, first leg goes into that same stitch that the last leg was made of the previous forked cluster, and off we go with our second one. Okay, so I'm going to make my way across here real quick, and I'll meet you at the end and show you how you're going to end each of the rows of forked clusters. So I'll see you there. I'm reaching the end of my forked cluster row here, and I will show you how to handle the end here. So you are going to make your final forked cluster over the last 2 stitches here. So I just did the second leg of this forked cluster into this stitch, and then I have one more stitch. So I will be making one more forked cluster here and then into my last stitch of the row. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply, into that same last stitch, I'm going to place a double crochet. And you do that because you're essentially decreasing with your first forked cluster. You essentially decrease, double crochet, decrease over the first 2 stitches to create that first forked cluster. So in order to keep our stitch count correct, we need to add one more stitch onto the end. So at the end of all of your forked cluster turning rows, you're going to do that. You're going to end with a double crochet. So when you see that written in the pattern, that is the deal. Okay, so I'm going to get going here. I'm on another row of my single crochet, and I'm going to get to the top of this little flap, and I will rejoin you before I begin to shape the neckline. So I will see you there. So I've reached the top of the other side of this little flap, this upper flap portion, and we are going to do this neckline together. So I am on the wrong side right now. I have just finished a row of the forked clusters. I am going to chain 1 and turn. So here I am on the wrong side. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a series of short rows to create this little tiny section here for the neckline. So for the size that I'm making, I'm going to go in with 18 stitches. You have to check the written pattern for the size that you're making for the number of stitches you're going to make for the width of this little extending top part for the neckline. So for me, that's 18. So I'm going to go in with 18 single crochet. and 18. And this next row is we're gonna turn. It's gonna be a row of forked clusters. So I'm gonna loosely chain 2. Again, that does not count as a stitch. All right, so now I'm gonna go back across with a row of forked clusters. So there will end up being 17 of the forked clusters, and then I'll end with a double crochet to make the stitch count 18. So I'm going to do that right now, just working my way across this tiny little section. Okay, make my last forked cluster over these last 2 stitches of this little section, and then I will end with a double crochet in that same stitch. Chain 1 and turn. All right, so my next little row here is going to be another row of single crochet, so 18 across. I will whip that out real quick here. 17 and 18. Okay, my next row is going to be a row of forked clusters, so I'm going to chain 2 loosely, turn, and I will whip out this row of forked clusters just like the last one that I did a couple rows ago. Okay, this is 17. This is my last forked cluster, and then 18 will be a double crochet. All right, chain 1 and turn again. Okay, so now what we've done is we've gotten the height of these rows on this side. And for this row here, we are going to do a row of single crochet across. Then I'm going to create a little border. There's going to be 7 stitches of a border going down, and then single crochet our way all the way across to this side, where we will turn and do the same little section on this side, all in one go. All right, so let's do that together. So I'm going to have a row of single crochet, 18 single crochet across the top. Now what I'm going to do is as I make my way down the side here, I'm going to just go straight in with a single crochet. I'm not going to chain or anything. I'm just going to single crochet my way down. And what you'll do is you will place 1 single crochet at the end of each of these single crochet rows, and then you'll place 2 single crochet at the end of each of these double crochet rows. So we'll have a single crochet here, we'll have 2 single crochets in the end of this one. Here's another single crochet row, so we'll do 1 at the end of that, and then we'll do 2 at the end of that, and then I'll show you how to transition to go across the front of this neckline here. All right, so straight in with my first single crochet at the end of that single crochet row I just did. Here we are at the end of a double crochet row. So I'm going to go in with 2 single crochet, pick up at least 2 stitches, just kind of find where you want to put it. Here we are at a single crochet row, so I'm going to go in with 1 single crochet there. We're at the end of a double crochet here. We will do 2 single crochets at the end of that row. Okay, and then 1 more at the end of this single crochet row that we began that little section with. Okay, so that just brings you down the side of that neckline. You will end up stitching your, that'll be part of the section that you stitch your hood onto later. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply single crochet my way across in each stitch all the way to the end. So I will do that here real quick, and I will meet you at the end of this row. Okay, I've made my way across to the opposite side here. I'm placing my last single crochet. And now I've essentially done my first little section of my first little row of single crochet that we did here, because I've made my way across with single crochet. So now as I turn, I'm going to go in with a short row of forked clusters. So I'm going to chain 2 loosely, and I'm going to turn here. And you're going to do a, you're going to be working over, well, based on your size, for the size I'm making, I'm working over 18 stitches. That's going to give me over 18 stitches gives me 17 forked clusters, because again, I'm using 2 stitches for the first one here. So I'm going to go in with 17 forked clusters, and then I'll end again with that 1 double crochet after these 17 forked clusters. So I will see at the end of this little section here. Okay, I make my last forked cluster here, and then I'm going to go into that same stitch with a double crochet. All right, so that's your first little section of forked clusters. I'm going to go ahead and get going with my next row of single crochet, then my next row of forked clusters again, and then ending with a row of single crochet to complete the other little section on the opposite side of the neck. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then what you're going to do at that point is you're going to seam across the shoulders. So you're folding your sweater, you know, flat, and these little sections are going to meet up with each other, and go ahead and seam. You can use a mattress stitch, whip stitch, however you're comfortable. I'm actually probably going to just slip stitch my way across on the wrong side with my wrong sides facing out, because I'll already have my working yarn attached. And again, I do love to just stitch as much as I can instead of sew. So probably at least for one side, slip stitch my way across, and on the other side I'll do a whip stitch to whip stitch the other shoulder together. And then I will come back here with you and I will get you going on the sleeves. So I will see you there. All right, we are going to get going on the sleeves now. So I have my sweater with the wrong side facing out, because the first round that we are going to do of the sleeve is a round of single crochet, which always happens on the wrong side. I am going to slip knot onto my hook to rejoin my yarn. I'm going to rejoin right at the armpit. And again, just like we kind of did on the neckline where we did our single crochets down the edge, whenever you're on the end of a row of single crochet, we're going to place one single crochet, and in the end of the double crochet of the forked cluster rows, we're going to place two single crochet, and we're going to do that all the way around. So I will get you going here. So I'm going to start at the end of this single crochet round right at the armpit. I'm going to slip stitch there and then chain one. And then into that same place, I'm going to be making my first single crochet. That's how we're going to rejoin. I'm going to mark my stitch. And then what we've got next is the end of a row of forked clusters. So I am simply going to place two single crochets along that edge. And I always try to pick up two loops of the through the end of that is basically the turning chain right there. All right, so then here I am at the end of a single crochet row. So I'm going to place one single crochet there. And here I am with a forked cluster row. So I'm placing two single crochets in the end of that row. All right, so I'm going to make my way all the way around. And the rounds on the sleeves here are going to be just like the rounds that you did on the tube portion of the sweater, where we're going to be doing turning rounds of single crochet and then rounds of forked clusters. So it's going to be the same 2-row repeat for the sleeves. So I just kind of wanted to show you how to get going with that. But when you come back around at the end, you're going to slip stitch to join, you're going to chain two and turn and make your way around the other side with a row of forked clusters, single crochet, forked clusters over and over and over again, all the way down until you get to your cuffs, which are done with ribbing, just like this. It'll look a little bit different because you're adding the ribbing on to the round, which is already complete, versus starting with the ribbing like you did here. But that is how you're going to get going with your sleeves, and you're going to be on Sleeve Island for a little bit. So I will come back with you to show you how to do the hood after we are done with the sleeves. All right, so let's get going on the hood. We are actually going to crochet the hood directly onto the sweater because, again, it helps us not have to seam so many pieces on, and I just love that. So we are going to start with the wrong side facing, because the first row of our hood is going to be a row of single crochet, and of course those are always done with the wrong side facing. So I have my sweater inside out at this point. So what you're going to do on your neckline is at this point you do want to choose what side of the sweater you want to be the front and back. At this point it's totally symmetrical, so choose what's going to be the front, because obviously the hood opening will be on the front of your sweater, and so make that choice now. So with the wrong side facing, what we're going to do is we're going to identify the middle 2 stitches of the front of your sweater along the neckline here. So you can do that simply by starting from the edges here and counting in. And if for some reason you have an odd number of stitches, do not stress out about it. I know some of you might feel like that's a total crime, but just do your best to locate the very center 2 stitches by the time you're wearing it. If it's odd and you've had to choose, you know, the very middle one and one to the side, it is not going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to tell at all. So go ahead and locate the middle 2 and place stitch markers in those 2, which will note the first stitch that you will make for the hood, making your way around, and then the last stitch that you are going to make for your hood. So go ahead and do that now. All right, I have marked the middle 2 stitches for my hood. So since I am right-handed, I am going to begin in this one on the left and start crocheting this way around for my first row. If you're left-handed, you'll simply start in this one on this side and go this direction, and your last stitch of the hood will happen in this one here. And then what we'll start doing is we're simply going to be doing turning rows and creating sort of a rectangle panel that ultimately we will close and seam across the top. And that is how the hood is constructed. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. I'm going to make my way and single crochet in one single crochet in each stitch all the way around. And when we get here, I'm going to turn and do a row of forked clusters going the other way, single crochet, forked clusters again and again and again. So refer to the pattern for the number of rows that you will need, and I'm going to go ahead and get going on that now. And then when I reach the top of that panel, we will come back together and I will show you how to seam across the top. And then after that, we will go ahead and come back and add sort of a little extension that we will be using for our for the drawstring for the hood. All right, I have finished my hood. So this is what it's going to look like before you seam it closed. So I have all of my rows completed, and now we are going to seam the top of the hood closed, and this is what that is going to look like. So I have fastened off and left a long tail for seaming it closed. And right now I still have the wrong side facing out, so that when we seam it closed, we will have the seam be on the inside. And what you are going to do at this point, you certainly could just fold it like this and slip stitch your way across right from where you left off. I kind of want the seam to be a little bit more subtle than slip stitching it across. So I am going to seam it closed. So you could use the mattress stitch, or you can use just a whip stitch, whatever you are comfortable with to seam this. So you are going to fold the top in half like this. This is the final row. You're going to end with a row of single crochet, and I'm just weaving using a tapestry needle. I am going to weave or seam the seam closed. I'm going to go ahead and use the mattress stitch. So I'm just going to go stitch by stitch, and I am going to go back and forth. Again, you can use your preferred method for seaming and matching up these stitches. I am going to go back and forth, and I am going to seam this closed. So I will go ahead and get to that. And one thing that I will show you here as well is that if you want your hood to be a little bit more rounded, so right now this is going to end up kind of being pointy, which is totally fine, but if you do want it to be a little bit more rounded, one little trick is once you have this seamed, is seam across kind of at a diagonal on that back corner. It doesn't take much, just a couple inches here, and you can seam back and forth, so that when you turn your hood inside out, this side over here will be a little bit more rounded and less pointy. So whichever way you want to do that. All right, so I'm going to get to seaming this closed, and then I will come back with you and I will show you how to work this front opening and create the little extension to put the drawstring through. The seam is completed on the top of my hood. I did go ahead and I seamed all the way across, and then I created just a little line of stitching at the very, very corner like this, just going straight across, so that when I turn my hood inside out, it's a little bit more rounded. And it doesn't have that like pointy tip right here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we are going to begin our little extension, which is going to house the drawstring for our hood. So I have made a slip knot onto my hook. And right at the front center here is where you are going to rejoin the yarn. So if you're right-handed, you'll be starting on this side and going in this direction. If you're left-handed, you will rejoin right here in this corner. So just locate that very first row of single crochet that you did on the hood right here, and you are going to pop your hook into the edge of that row there, into the very end of the row, and we are going to begin with a row of single crochet. And these are just going to be turning rows for around our hood again, which will create a little extension, and then we will fold it over and we will seam it closed with our drawstring on the inside of it. So every time as you single crochet around, you're going to do one single crochet at the end of each of the single crochet rows. Let me zoom in a little bit here. And then when you get to the forked cluster rows, you'll be doing 2 single crochets at the end of each of the forked cluster rows. So here's a single crochet row, here's a forked cluster row, and that'll allow you to have your single crochet row be done evenly all the way around. So I joined with a slip stitch there, and I'm going to chain 1 tightly, and I am going to make my first single crochet in that same spot. And I will mark that first stitch so I know where to end my row next time. All right, so now I'm at a forked cluster row, so I'm going to go ahead and picking up 2 loops for each of these stitches. I am going to place 2 single crochets at the end of that forked cluster row. And here we are again at our single crochet row, so I'm going to 1 single crochet at the end of that one, 2 at the end of this forked cluster row, and so on and so forth. So go ahead and do that all the way around, and then when you get to the end, you're simply going to chain and turn. So refer to the written pattern for all of the little details you need to know about doing this extension, but this is where you are going to begin with that. All right, so I will go ahead and get going with this extension, and I will meet you back and show you how we are going to assemble and kind of seam this closed around our drawstring. All right, so for the drawstring, we are going to be working with our smaller sized hook. So for me, that was a 5mm, and we're going to be using 2 pieces of yarn at the same time. And this is how you are going to use how you are going to make the drawstring. So we are going to slip knot onto our hook with both of these yarns held together. It's a really simple and strong cord that could be used for all kinds of different things. This is my favorite way to do a crochet cord. Now what you're going to do with these 2 different yarns is you will take one into your working hand just like you normally hold your yarn, and then you're going to let the other one dangle in front like this. Okay, and for your first move here, you are going to take this dangly one in the front, and you're going to wrap it over your hook from front to back, like this, and hold it underneath this finger here. And then you're going to yarn over from back to front with your working yarn, and holding all of those together, you are going to pull through all of the loops on your hook, like that. And you're going to continue this move over and over until your drawstring reaches the right size. So here we go again. So holding onto your loop on the hook there, you're going to grab the dangly yarn in front to back. You're wrapping it over your hook, and you're going to hold on to that with this finger. And then with your working yarn, yarning it over from back to front and grabbing all of that and pulling through. It's super easy. You'll get in the flow of it and it goes really, really fast. Okay, so front to back with the dangly yarn, back to front with the working yarn, hold on to this and pull it through. Okay, I'm gonna get this going a little bit so you can see it in action. Okay, and once you kind of get used to the flow of it, you just pick up the pace a little bit and get on with it. And then when you get to the end, you'll simply pull all the yarns through the loop on your hook and you will fasten off and knot it off. If you want to add a little bit of pizzazz, you could add some beads onto the ends, or decorate the ends of the drawstring however you would like at that point. Okay, so this is how it comes together. It's really pretty. It's really tight. Perfect little drawstring for the hood. All right, so here's what we're gonna do for the drawstring. So I have completed my 6 rows of single crochet, which has created sort of this extension onto my hood that I am going to fold and sew the drawstring into. And this is how we are going to do that. So I still have my sweater right side, or rather wrong side facing. So it is inside out at this point. So I want as I'm sewing this closed over the drawstring, I want to make sure that I'm doing this seam on what is going to become the inside of my sweater. So right now, this is the inside that's facing, this is the right side that's on the inside of my hood, okay? So I have fastened off and I've left a super duper long, probably more than I need, but I didn't really want to have to add more yarn. I've got a long tail here that I am going to thread onto my tapestry needle. And what is going to happen here is I am going to show you how this is going to work. So basically what we're going to be doing is we are going to be sewing through both of these loops. You can see your little stitches there, your little V stitches. We're going to be picking up both loops of this V stitch, and then to the corresponding stitch on the very first row of single crochet that you did for the hood, we are going to be, let me find my little tapestry needle, we are going to be picking up just the front loops here. So we're not going to be going all the way through the hood, right through the row. We're actually going to be picking up these two, so you can locate the front of your single crochet. They're going to look like these little V's going all the way along that first row. And we're going to be picking up the two little loops of the front of the stitch, and that is what we are going to be sewing together. Okay, so I'm going to identify my first stitch, and as if I'm folding it this way, I'm going to be bringing my needle back to front through that first stitch. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and pull it all the way through, and then going in this direction, I'm going to pick up the front two loops of my first single crochet that I did on this first row of this extension. Okay, and this is what that's going to do. Pulling that through this direction is going to begin my little hole. Okay, and I wanted to show you that before I put the drawstring in. I didn't want to complicate things, but we actually do need to put the drawstring in first because we're going to be sewing this over top. And I'm going to show you the next one here as well. Okay, so moving on to my next stitch here, you can see this next one right here. Bringing my needle from back to front under that one. Pulling that through. and then identifying the front 2 loops of my next stitch there. This was the second one that I made of the first row of this extension, and pulling that through. And the reason why we're doing this is it's going to allow the seam to stay completely on the inside, and then what you'll see on the back of the hood is you just won't see any, you know, I don't know, any messiness from seaming this closed. Okay, I'm gonna do one more here, and then we'll go ahead and pop that drawstring in so we can start doing this over top the drawstring. All right, so here's our next little stitch. Bring that needle through. And before I tighten that up, I'm finding the next stitch corresponding down below, which is this one right here, this little V. So you can see these little V's are my stitches. Okay, so we're picking up that next one under both of those front loops there, pulling it through. I think I've just got way too much length on this, and I will probably just cut that down. Okay, so you want to do it tight, but you don't want to pull super duper tight, or the whole thing will kind of cinch up on you. But this is just creating this little casing. This needs to get weaved in. It's creating this little casing here where your drawstring is going to go in. Okay, so I'm going to stop and put my drawstring in of the next stitch over. Just push those ends through before I get any farther. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that through. And what we're going to do as we continue on is we're going to be sewing over top. You know, we're going to kind of keep this inside. Won't be sewing over top like this. All right, so let me keep showing you just a couple more here, and I think you'll get the hang of it. All right, so my next stitch is this one right here. So I'm bringing in my needle from the back to the front, pulling that through, and then finding my next single crochet that it corresponds with on that first row right here underneath, pulling it through. All right, so here's how my hood turned out. I have my sweater facing, the right side facing out at this point, so you can see what that ends up looking like. I just love how that ends up looking, where the drawstring ends up getting housed. So now we are gonna do our final thing by sewing on the pocket. And of course it's optional. If you don't want a front pocket, then just skip it and don't put it on. But make sure again that your right side is facing out at this point, and make sure you've got your sweater perfectly straight and flat out in front of you like this. And we are going to take our pocket. I have blocked it, which has corrected that sort of bias kind of angle that happens with this pattern when you're doing a flat panel like that. It ends up kind of having a sharper angle on one side than the other side, so I have blocked it to correct that. So again, make sure you've got your right side facing. And the way that I seam this on is I go single crochet row to this single crochet row, which is like 2 forked clusters sections up. So it's the 3rd single crochet row. You've got one here right along the ribbed hem, and then you've got your second one here and your 3rd one here. And this is where I line up that bottom row of the pocket where you started it. So this is pretty much your chain right there. And then you're going to line up the top single crochet row with, you know, this one up here, just lining up the rows evenly. And you're going to take a tapestry needle and simply seam on the pockets through this row and through this row. I'm just going to whip stitch it around through each individual stitch so it'll be nice and firmly attached. And then of course you're going to be leaving these open. You're not going to be seaming here. So you'll do one row. You can start up here or down here. You'll seam it on, fasten it off and weave in, and then you'll do the other row with this separate piece of yarn that you left for that one. So just make sure it's centered. Again, I mean, adjust it if you want it higher or lower, that's totally fine. This is where I'm going to put mine on. Make sure you have an even number of stitches on each of these sides and just start to seam it onto your sweater. Okay, so there's my bottom seam. I have this one totally attached, and I'm going to line up my top one and do the same. There is the pocket.